Every town hides a story it's afraid to remember, and Brenton Hollow was no different. When the truth finally walked through its doors wearing leather and silence, no one could imagine the mercy that would follow. Watch till the end for a twist you won't forget, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. The dawn in Brenton Hollow crept in slow and golden, brushing over empty streets and closed shop windows, a town so quiet it felt like it had forgotten how to breathe. But then came the sound, low, distant, growing like thunder rolling across the plains. Within minutes, it wasn't a sound anymore. It was a storm. A dozen Harleys tore through the silence, chrome flashing like lightning in the morning light. Curtains parted. A gas station attendant froze mid-swipe of his windshield. The old man outside the barber's shop muttered, not again, under his breath. When the motorcycles pulled into the gravel lot beside Millie's diner, the ground seemed to tremble. At the head of the pack rode Malik Graves, a black man in his late 30s with shoulders broad as the handlebars he gripped and a face marked by a single scar slicing from his cheekbone to his jaw. His jacket bore the faded emblem of Iron Hands MC, a club name spoken with caution across half the state. But what the town didn't know was that behind the tough leather and tattoos lived a man still carrying ghosts he couldn't outrun. Malik parked his Harley first, cutting the engine, and the others followed. One by one, the thunder died, leaving behind a hollow stillness. As the dust settled, he removed his helmet, his dark eyes scanning the diner sign that hung crooked above the door. He wasn't there for trouble. Not today. He just wanted coffee, quiet, and maybe a place where the memories would stop chasing him for a while. He walked in boots, heavy, and the small bell above the door jingled weakly. Conversations died instantly. People pretended to eat, but eyes followed him all the same. He was used to it, the weight of assumptions, the stares that said danger before he'd even spoken a word. Still, he nodded politely to the old couple in the corner and took a seat near the window. His brothers filled the booths around him, their laughter low but watchful. Then she appeared, the waitress. Her name tag read Elara Wynn. Early 30s, maybe. Her hair tied back too tightly, her eyes lined with exhaustion instead of makeup. She smiled one of those automatic smiles that didn't reach her eyes and asked if he wanted coffee. Malik's voice came rough but kind. Black? No sugar? When she leaned closer to pour, he saw it. A faint bruise near her jawline hidden under a thin layer of foundation. It wasn't fresh, but it wasn't old either. And instantly his stomach dropped. He'd seen that bruise before. Not on her, but on someone else years ago. His sister Naima used to wear the same kind of smile, painted over the same kind of pain. The memory hit him so hard, it almost knocked the air out of his lungs. He looked away, staring at his reflection in the window, but the image stayed her face. Her trembling hands, her silence before the night she never came home. He clenched his jaw, forcing the ghost back into the dark corner of his mind where it belonged. But something about this waitress, her quietness. The way her hands shook slightly when she set the cup down, it was like watching a replay of a tragedy he'd already lived. "You okay?" he asked softly. Elara blinked, caught off guard, and forced another smile. Just a busy morning, that's all. But he could hear the lie in her tone. She turned quickly, walking toward the counter, her steps light and hurried. A man's voice barked from the kitchen. "Elara, you forget how to move." The words sliced through the diner like a whip. She flinched before answering. "No, sir." The man's shadow loomed briefly through the order window, thick neck-rolled sleeves, a face twisted by control. Malik's fingers tightened around the mug. His biker brother Hawk nudged him, whispering, "Boss, don't start anything. We just stopped for breakfast." Malik didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes stayed locked on the door that led to the kitchen, on the sound of plates clattering, and the muffled apology that followed. The diner returned to its awkward rhythm. The locals resumed half-hearted chatter, pretending nothing was wrong. But Malik's mind was already elsewhere, replaying the bruise, the tone, the way she seemed to shrink under that man's voice. He knew what fear looked like when it was dressed up to look polite. He'd worn it himself once, long before the road hardened him. He tried to shake it off, but the image clung like smoke. He caught her glancing at him again as she came out with a tray of food. This time their eyes met, and in that fleeting moment, something flickered in hers. Recognition. It was gone just as fast, but Malik saw it. She dropped a coffee cup, porcelain shattering across the tile. Everyone jumped. She crouched to clean it, muttering an apology to no one in particular. The manager stormed out from the kitchen, face red. "You useless!" He started, but stopped when he noticed Malik standing. The room tensed. Malik said nothing, just stared a calm so controlled it was dangerous. The manager's voice faltered, his arrogance shrinking under the biker's gaze. He grumbled something and turned away. Malik sat back down slowly, heart-steady eyes still on Ilara. She whispered, "I'm sorry," as if it were her fault the air itself had gone cold. "Don't be," he said quietly. "Not for that." She hesitated, then gave a small nod, and disappeared behind the counter again. For a long while, Malik didn't move. The coffee cooled. The chatter returned in nervous waves. Outside, the sky dimmed slightly as clouds began to crawl across the sun. The morning after the engines left Brenton Hollow, the diner opened to the same quiet hum of silverware and half-hearted conversation, but something had changed. Malik Graves sat in his garage 30 miles away, staring at the dust collecting on his Harley's chrome hearing, that waitress's soft voice every time the wind slipped through the door. He tried to shake it off, but he couldn't. The bruise, the fear, the way she said "I'm sorry" for things that weren't her fault, it clawed at his conscience like a ghost refusing to rest. By noon, he was already back on the road, tires spitting gravel as he followed the curve of the hills toward Brenton Hollow again. His brothers didn't question him. They'd learned not to. Malik didn't ride for reasons, he rode for what wouldn't let him sleep. When he pulled up outside Millie's diner, the same bell above the door sang out its thin, nervous jingle. Inside, everything looked the same. The faded red booths, the old man in the corner reading the paper, the sound of sizzling bacon. Everything except Ilara. She turned at the sound of the door, eyes widening slightly, before she quickly masked it with that same polite smile, the one that tried to say "I'm fine," while her hands told another story. Her wrist bore a faint new mark, not a bruise yet, but the kind of redness that promised to become one. Malik sat at the same table as before his presence, pulling the air tighter around the room. "Morning," he said quietly. "You look tired." She set the cup down too hard, spilling a drop of coffee. "Didn't sleep much," she said. "Long night." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. From the kitchen came a voice he hadn't forgotten, a voice that barked and sneered as if authority were a weapon. "Ilara, you got customers or what?" The man appeared seconds later, wiping his hands on a stained towel. Gordon Pike. His gut pressed against his apron, and his smirk carried years of unchecked cruelty. Malik watched as Gordon brushed past her deliberately close enough to make her step back. She flinched before he even touched her. That told Malik everything he needed to know. His jaw flexed and his knuckles whitened around the cup. Gordon looked over, eyes narrowing. "You again?" he said. "Didn't know we were running a charity for drifters." Malik's tone stayed low, almost casual. "Coffee's coffee, right?" The man grunted and stalked off, but not before muttering something under his breath that made Malik's stomach twist. He called her mine. It wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for the biker to hear. Ilara froze for half a second, her breath hitching. Malik's eyes darkened. He said nothing, not yet, but inside something steady and cold began to take shape, a line he knew he was about to cross. The waitress busied herself with refills, trying to pretend nothing had happened, but her hands trembled each time she walked near Gordon. Malik's gaze followed quietly, calculating, reading the body language like a man who'd spent his life spotting danger before it struck. It wasn't in her words. It was in the way she moved, in the way her shoulders never dropped, in the constant fear of being watched. Every time the man passed, she tensed. Every time she laughed, it sounded like a plea. Malik had seen hardened criminals beg for mercy with more ease than she smiled. When his food arrived, he barely touched it. Instead, he watched the reflections in the window, the way Gordon's figure moved behind the counter, the way Ilara avoided his line of sight. Hawk slid into the booth across from him, lowering his voice. "Your wound tight, boss. What's this about?" Malik's answer came quiet, but sharp. "That girl's getting hurt. You see it too, don't you?" Hawk shrugged. "We can't fix every broken thing in every small town. You start playing hero, you'll drown." Malik looked at him, expression unreadable. "Maybe I already did." Hawk didn't press. He'd seen that look before, the one that came right before Malik made decisions no one could talk him out of. The door opened, the bell chimed again, and Malik's attention snapped back to the counter. Ilara was serving a couple at the far booth when Gordon appeared behind her again, pretending to reach for a coffee pot, but pressing too close. She didn't move. Her face went pale, her jaw locked. The man's lips brushed near her ear as he whispered something Malik couldn't hear, but her eyes flicked to the window, searching for something, anything that felt safe. That look was enough. Malik stood abruptly, the chair legs scraping the tile. The entire diner went still. He didn't move toward them, not yet. He just stood there, his gaze locked on Gordon, his expression carved in stone. The manager turned, sneering. "Something wrong, biker boy, yeah?" Malik said evenly. "You're breathing too close to her." A couple of truckers shifted uneasily in their seats. One muttered, "Not our business." But the air felt charged, now heavy and waiting. Gordon took a step forward, puffing out his chest. "You think you can come in here and tell me how to run my place?" Malik didn't blink. "No. But I can tell you what happens if you touch her again." The silence stretched like a live wire. Then Gordon laughed a short, ugly sound that barely hid the fear behind it. "You don't scare me," Good Malik said quietly. "I'm not trying to." He sat back down calm as a loaded gun with the safety off. The man spat a curse and stormed back into the kitchen. Ilara exhaled shakily, eyes darting toward Malik. He gave a slight nod and she turned away before tears could form. Hawk leaned closer. "You just painted a target on your back, boss." Malik took a sip of his coffee. The night was thick with heat when Malik Graves pulled into his garage, the engine growling down to silence like a restless animal. The neon light above his workbench flickered, throwing jagged shadows across the concrete floor, littered with tools, oil stains, and old regrets. His brothers from the Iron Hands had gone home, the laughter and noise fading hours ago, leaving only the echo of his own thoughts. He sat heavily in a metal chair, elbows on his knees, staring at the black grease under his nails. The smell of gasoline clung to him, but beneath it was the faint scent of smoke, the same that had followed him since the night his sister's apartment burned after her husband's final rage. He reached for the chain around his neck and pulled out a silver ring, thin, worn, and engraved with the letter N. Naima Graves. The ring caught the weak light, and for a moment he was 20 again, running through rain, hearing her scream over the phone, arriving too late. He clenched it in his fist, jaw locked. "You deserved better," he muttered. For years he'd told himself that vengeance and redemption were two sides of the same road, but time had proven him wrong. Nothing he did, no fight he picked, no road he conquered, had ever made the guilt quieter. Until Ilara. There was something about her, the same quiet strength, the same silence that wasn't weakness but survival. She reminded him of Naima before the light in her eyes went out. He'd seen that bruise on Ilara's jaw, and it had felt like history reaching out to test him. Would he fail to act again, or would he finally stand before another life was ruined? The TV hanging from the garage wall blinked to life, automatically running the local news. Malik wasn't listening until he heard the name Brenton Hollow. His head turned sharply. The anchor spoke in her usual calm tone, reading from a teleprompter that didn't care about the stories it told. In other news, a former employee of Millie's Diner has been released from county care after an alleged assault last year. The victim, identified as Clara Vance, suffered multiple fractures during an altercation with the diner's manager, Gordon Pike. Malik froze. The photo on the screen showed a woman with bruised eyes and a cast. The caption beneath read, "No charges filed." His pulse thudded in his ears. The screen flickered again, moving on to weather reports, but the image stayed burned into his mind. Gordon Pike had done it before, and he'd walked away untouched. Malik rose, pacing the narrow space between his bikes. His boots scuffed against the floor with each turn. "You've been doing this for years," he muttered, "and nobody stopped you." He could still see Alara's face, the way she trembled when Gordon's voice filled the diner. His hands curled into fists. For the first time in a long time, he felt the cold fire of purpose settle inside him. Steady, deliberate, unshakable. He sat back down and pulled open the drawer of his workbench. Inside were pieces of his past life, things he hadn't touched in years. A folded police report, a faded obituary, a pocket knife with a cracked handle. The report was about Naima's case marked closed. The knife was the one her husband had used before setting the fire. Malik had found it later buried behind the house. He should have turned it in, but he hadn't. He kept it as proof of what he'd lost, proof of what happened when he did nothing. He turned the knife in his hands, feeling the weight of old choices. A photo of the Iron Hand sat on the wall, dozen men standing before their bikes, grinning, oblivious to how life would harden them. They'd all been outcasts once, men with records, scars, broken families. But Malik had built them into something that stood for loyalty above all. And tonight, loyalty meant justice. His phone buzzed on the table, pulling him back. It was a text from Hawk. "You good, boss?" Malik stared at the screen before typing back. "Not yet." He shut the phone off and walked outside. The night air was thick with humidity, crickets singing in the fields. The stars were faint behind the clouds. In the distance, the faint lights of Brenton Hollow glowed like a memory. He mounted his Harley, not to ride, but to think. The cold metal felt familiar, like armor. He remembered Naima once saying, "You can't save everyone, Malik." She'd been wrong. He might not have saved her, but he could save someone else. He looked toward the town, the engine off, but ready. Tomorrow he'd return. But this time he wouldn't sit quietly while a man like Gordon Pike continued to breathe easy. He went back inside and poured himself a drink, whiskey straight, no ice. It burned, but not enough to erase the images running through his mind. The sound of Alara's cracked voice saying, "You don't know what he'll do," haunted him. He did know. That was the problem. He took another sip, staring at the wall, eyes unfocused. The garage door rattled lightly in the wind. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. The world felt distant, suspended in that strange quiet before something breaks. He turned off the light and sat in the dark, the only illumination coming from the faint glow of the TV screen, still looping the same news cycle. The anchor's voice returned for a moment, reporting on weather and traffic as if lives weren't burning quietly just outside the camera's frame. Malik looked at the ring one more time, thumb tracing its edge. "I couldn't save you," he whispered, "but I can save her." He tucked it back under his shirt, the cool metal pressing against his chest like a vow. When he closed his eyes, he saw both faces, Naima's and Alara's, blending into one. Different women, same pain, same silence begging to be broken. He leaned back in the chair, every muscle tense, his mind sharpening into focus. Tomorrow would be different. He wasn't riding in as a customer. He was riding in as reckoning. The roar of his bike would no longer be background noise. It would be the sound of something long overdue. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the smell of rain. Malik looked up at the ceiling as the first drop hit the roof. The morning rose gray and heavy rain clouds hanging over Brenton Hollow like a warning. Malik Graves rode back into town before the diner even opened, the rumble of his Harley echoing down Main Street, cutting through the mist like a growl that the world had tried too long to silence. The streets were empty, windows still dark, but the weight of what he had decided last night rode with him. His sister's ring rested cold against his chest, steady as his heartbeat. He didn't know exactly what he would do when he saw Gordon Pike again, but he knew one thing: he wouldn't walk out until something changed. The Iron Hands weren't with him this time. He needed quiet, not noise. Reckoning didn't always have to shout. Sometimes it just had to stand still and mean every word. He parked beside the diner, killed the engine, and sat there for a long moment, listening to the ticking of the cooling metal. The smell of rain mixed with old grease and faint tobacco. The door of the diner was half open, light spilling out onto the wet gravel. Alara was already inside, her hair tied back, shoulders tight. She was wiping down the counter, but her movements were distracted, like her thoughts had already run ahead to fear what the day would bring. Malik pushed open the door. The bell above it chimed weakly, a sound that carried more tension than welcome. She turned at once, her eyes widening. For a heartbeat, the relief on her face was real, then it broke into worry. "You came back," she said softly, almost accusing. He took a seat at the counter, nodding once. Couldn't stay away. She tried to smile, but her voice trembled when she said, "You shouldn't be here." He didn't answer. She poured him coffee with hands that wouldn't stay still. "He's in early today," she whispered. "He's been angry since you left. Said you were trying to make him look weak." Malik stirred the coffee, his jaw tight. "He does that on his own." She looked at him sharply, eyes pleading. "Please don't make this worse," she said, voice so quiet it barely reached him. He met her gaze with calm that didn't belong to peace. "It's already worse if you stay quiet." The words hung between them, heavy as the clouds outside. Her breath caught, and she looked down, staring at the counter as though it could protect her. Malik took a slow sip, watching her, memorizing the way fear changed her posture, the way she kept glancing toward the kitchen door, like it was a mouth that could swallow her whole. The silence broke when the back door slammed open. Gordon Pike emerged, his apron already stained, his eyes bloodshot from a night without sleep. He saw Malik immediately, and a sneer crawled across his face. "You again?" he said, voice dripping with disdain. "Guess the road's out of gas if you're back here bothering my staff." Malik didn't move, didn't even flinch. "Just came for breakfast," he said evenly. "Didn't realize kindness was off the menu." Gordon laughed, short and cruel. "You bikers think you can just walk in anywhere and start acting like saviors. She doesn't need saving. Do you, Alara?" She froze behind the counter, her lips parting, but no words coming out. Gordon's grin widened. "See? She knows her place." Malik set his cup down gently, the ceramic clicking against the counter. "Funny thing about places," he said. "Sometimes people get forced into them." The manager's smile vanished. "You got a problem with how I run my diner?" "Yeah," Malik said, standing. "You mistake fear for respect." The air in the diner turned dense. Alara's breath quickened, panic flashing in her eyes. "Malik, please," she whispered again, gripping the coffee pot like it might hold her together. He didn't look at her, but his voice softened just slightly. "You don't have to protect him." Gordon's hand twitched, but he didn't move closer. "You think I'm afraid of you? I think you should be." Malik said, his tone quiet, but absolute. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The tension stretched thin as wire. Then Gordon barked out a laugh and turned away. "You think you scare me with your sad eyes and your road dust. You don't know who you're messing with." "I know enough," Malik said. "Clara Vance, hospitalized, no charges filed." Gordon froze mid-step. His face paled and his voice faltered. "How the hell do you know about that? News runs everywhere," Malik replied. "Some of us just listen better." Alara gasped softly, realizing what Malik had uncovered. Gordon turned, his composure cracking. "You don't get it," he hissed. "She started it. She always does." Malik stepped closer, his shadow cutting across the counter. "Men like you always say that right before someone stops you." Gordon's breathing quickened. He pointed toward the door. "Get out." "Not until I finish my coffee," Malik said calmly. The defiance in his tone made Gordon hesitate because the biker wasn't bluffing. The man's scarred face didn't need volume to threaten. It carried weight because it had lived through worse. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, the kind that promised more than rain. Alara's eyes darted between them, terrified of the collision she knew was coming. Malik finally sat again, deliberately, slow turning his cup between his hands, as if the conversation were done. But his mind wasn't still. Every sound from the kitchen, every tremor in Alara's breath pulled tighter on the coil inside him. Gordon spat another insult, But Malik's focus was elsewhere on the way Alara's eyes glistened when she turned away on the faint tremor in her lower lip. She looked like someone praying for rescue while convincing herself she didn't deserve it. He'd seen that before, too. The bell above the door jingled, and two locals entered, nodding at Gordon before sitting by the window. The tension broke, not with peace, but with performance. Gordon smiled again, pretending civility. Malik saw the act for what it was, control, not charm. He finished his coffee, stood, and laid a $50 bill on the counter. "Keep the change," he said, looking at Alara. Her eyes flicked toward the kitchen, then back to him. She wanted to thank him, but couldn't. Words failed her. Gordon sneered, muttering, "She doesn't need your charity." The rain didn't stop through the night. It came in sheets that soaked the roads and turned the dirt lots into rivers of mud, the kind that mirrored the color of old regret. By morning, Brenton Hollow woke under a heavy sky that pressed low enough to touch. Malik Graves hadn't slept. He sat at the edge of his garage with his jacket half zipped, the air thick with gasoline and storm water. Every drop that hit the roof felt like a countdown. He'd told himself he'd wait, that he'd think that he'd find a calm way to deal with Gordon Pike. But there was no calm left. There was only purpose, and it burned steady now, like a fuse that had waited years to be lit. The silver ring around his neck felt heavier than usual, and when he touched it, the metal was ice cold. His sister's memory whispered inside him, not with words, but with a feeling, the same ache that had driven him all this way. By sunrise, he was already riding. The storm chased him down the highway, wind snapping at his jacket, thunder cracking like gunfire behind him. When he reached Brenton Hollow, puddles covered the streets, and the diner's sign flickered like a dying light. He parked his Harley and killed the engine. The sound of the rain faded under the faint hum of fear that always lingered in small towns before something big happened. He walked in the bell, jingling its nervous little note. The smell of coffee and grease hung heavy, same as always, but the air felt colder. Alara looked up from behind the counter, eyes red, hair damp. She froze when she saw him. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. Malik sat at the same stool he always did. "You said that yesterday?" She glanced towards the kitchen, voice trembling. "He's in a mood." Malik stirred his coffee once. "Then so am I." The door to the back swung open and Gordon Pike stepped out. Jaw-clenched eyes burning like the storm outside. He didn't even try to hide his contempt. "You just don't learn, do you?" Malik didn't look up. "Guess not." Gordon took a step closer, wiping his hands on his apron. "You think you scare me, boy?" Malik raised his gaze, slow and deliberate. "You should already be scared." The man laughed too loud, but his voice cracked at the edges. "You gonna hit me? That what this is?" Malik reached into his jacket pocket and laid a folded piece of paper on the counter between them. Gordon frowned, stepping closer. "What the hell's that Malik didn't blink? It's your record. Assault. 2 counts sealed by settlement. One of them was Clara Vance." Alara froze mid-motion, her hand hovering over a coffee cup. The room went so quiet that even the rain outside seemed to pause. Gordon's smirk faltered, but only for a second. He leaned forward, trying to sound amused. "Where'd you get that doesn't matter," Malik said. "What matters is you kept getting away with it. But that ends now." The door opened behind them. The sound of boots filled the diner as half a dozen members of the Iron Hands walked in dripping, wet, silent eyes sharp. No one spoke. They didn't need to. They spread across the room with calm precision, taking up positions near the doors and windows. The customers, a couple of locals eating breakfast, looked around nervously, but no one moved. The storm outside grew louder, thunder echoing like the heartbeat of what was coming. Gordon stepped back, trying to laugh it off again, but his voice shook this time. "What's this supposed to be, intimidation?" Malik stood slowly, the stool scraping against the floor. "No," he said. "It's accountability." Gordon's eyes darted toward the door, then to the bikers blocking it. His throat worked as he tried to keep his composure. "You think anyone's gonna believe you over me? You're just some washed-up thug." Malik took another step closer, his shadow swallowing the light that hit Gordon's shoes. "Doesn't matter if they believe me," he said. "They'll believe her. He turned slightly, nodding toward Ilara. She looked startled, tears welling up in her eyes. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I can't." "You can," Malik said gently. "You already did." She didn't understand until he pointed at the counter. The folded police report was open now, and a small recorder sat next to it, blinking red. It had been recording since the moment Gordon started talking. Gordon lunged forward to grab it, but one of the bikers, Hawk, stepped between them, his hand landing firmly on Gordon's shoulder. "I wouldn't," he said. Gordon froze, his arrogance draining into panic. "You can't do this," he snapped. "You don't know who I know." Malik's tone stayed calm. "Neither do you." The rain hammered the windows harder, the storm now raging full force. The diner felt like an island trapped in time, every pair of eyes locked on the same unfolding truth. Gordon's voice broke into a shout. "Get out of my diner!" Malik took one last step forward, his face inches from Gordon's. "You lost the right to call it yours the day you made it her prison." He nodded toward Ilara again, and for the first time she didn't look away. Her fear was still there, but under it something else began to form, a small, shaking defiance that Malik recognized all too well. Gordon tried to speak again, but his words died in his throat when Hawk pulled back his jacket just enough to show the metal handle of a wrench tucked into his belt. Malik didn't have to say anything. The message was clear. This wasn't about violence, it was about ending it. Malik picked up the recorder, turned it off, and tucked it into his jacket. "This goes to the sheriff," he said quietly, "and if it disappears, so will you." Gordon stumbled back, breathing hard, face red. The customers sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene or hide. Ilara's tears fell silently, mixing with the rain leaking through the doorframe. Malik turned toward her and nodded once. "You're done here," he said softly. "Go home, pack a bag." She shook her head weakly. "I have nowhere to go." "You do now?" he said, his voice low but certain. "We'll find you something better." Gordon slammed his fist on the counter. "You can't just take her." Malik's eyes flicked toward him one final time. "I'm not taking her," he said. "I'm freeing her." Then he turned to leave, his boots echoing in the stunned silence. The iron hands followed, parting the room like a tide. The storm had passed, but the air still felt heavy with what had been left unsaid. That afternoon, the town of Brenton Hollow carried the hum of something uneasy, like everyone had felt a tremor and was waiting for the quake. Malik Graves rode back to the diner one last time this time, not to warn, not to intimidate, but to finish what had begun. The iron hands followed behind him, their engines echoing low through the narrow streets. Windows lifted, curtains twitched, whispers passed from door to door. Everyone had heard by now the bikers had cornered Gordon Pike that morning, and nobody knew what would come next. Malik parked his Harley right in front, his reflection sharp against the diner's window. Inside, the lunch rush had thinned, leaving only a few regulars, pretending not to care. The bell over the door chimed as he walked in, boots slick from the leftover rain. Ilara stood behind the counter, pale but standing taller than before. Her apron was gone, her uniform half untucked, as if she had finally stopped trying to look perfect for a place that only ever bruised her. When she saw him, she froze for a heartbeat before managing a small nod. Malik returned it silently and sat at his usual stool. The others took the booth by the wall. The low murmur of forks and spoons filled the air again until the kitchen door swung open. Gordon Pike stepped out, wiping his hands, his mouth set in a crooked smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked different today, tired, brittle, but still trying to pretend control. He saw Malik and stopped mid-step, his face twisting. "You again?" he said, voice sharp but shaking. "You just can't mind your own business, can you?" Malik didn't answer. He poured sugar into his coffee, even though he didn't take it sweet. The spoon stirred slowly, steady as a heartbeat. "Afternoon," he said calmly. "Heard you've been talking." Gordon scoffed, looking around at the few customers left. "Talking? I don't have to talk. Whole town already knows what you did. You stormed in here, played sheriff, scared a girl into turning on her boss?" Ilara flinched but didn't speak. Malik's gaze didn't move from the cup. She didn't turn on anyone. Truth doesn't need convincing. It just needs daylight. Gordon laughed, short and ugly. You think anyone's gonna believe some drifter and a waitress over me? I've been feeding this town for 20 years. Malik looked up now, eyes unreadable. And starving its soul for just as long? Gordon's smirk faltered, and the silence that followed felt like glass ready to break. One of the bikers, Rex, stood from the booth and walked over, slow, deliberate. He dropped something on the counter. It was a photo, old, grainy, printed from a newspaper clipping. It showed a younger woman in the same uniform Ilara wore, her face half turned from the camera, one eye swollen shut. You remember her? Rex asked. Gordon froze. The blood drained from his face. That's Clara Vance, Malik said. The one from the hospital report. You said she started it. Gordon's mouth opened, then closed again. He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. You people think you can dig up ghosts and play heroes. That picture proves nothing. Malik leaned forward slightly. Maybe not, but it makes people start asking questions. And questions are poison to cowards. Gordon looked around the room, realizing too late that the customers were watching him now. One man in a trucker cap whispered something to his wife. A woman by the window put down her fork. The walls of silence that had protected him for years were beginning to crack. Malik turned his head slightly, eyes drifting toward the corner booth. You've been quiet long enough, he said softly. Everyone turned. Sitting there, almost hidden behind a newspaper, was the sheriff of Brenton Hollow. A thick man with a weathered face and tired eyes he'd been eating quietly the entire time, pretending not to see. Now he folded the paper slowly, revealing the badge pinned to his chest. The diner went dead quiet. Gordon straightened, forcing a smirk. Afternoon, Sheriff, he said too loudly. Glad you're here. Maybe you can deal with these people. They're harassing me, threatening me in my own business. The sheriff didn't respond right away. He stood setting his coffee cup down carefully on the table. Funny thing, he said, his voice steady but low. I've been sitting here for 20 minutes listening. Didn't hear a single threat. Gordon's face tightened. You gonna take their word over mine? The sheriff reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. I'm gonna take the truth. Been hearing rumors about this place for a while, but nobody'd talk. Seems like they finally are. Malik didn't move. He let the words sink in, watching the shift in the room. Gordon's confidence drained with every passing second. He looked at the sheriff, then at the bikers, then at Ilara, whose eyes met his now without flinching. You think you can ruin me, he spat. This place is all I've got. Malik's voice was calm but cutting. You had more once. You just destroyed it. The sheriff's hand rested on his holster, not in threat, but in warning. You and me are gonna take a ride down to the station, he said. Got some questions that have been waiting a long time. Gordon backed up, shaking his head. No, you can't, I can, the sheriff said, voice hardening. And I will. The room stayed silent as the man who had spent years shouting orders suddenly found himself with nothing left to say. The sheriff motioned to the door. Gordon hesitated, but the sight of the iron hand standing by the exit made the choice for him. He walked past Malik, muttering curses under his breath, but none of them landed. For the first time, his voice held no power. The bell jingled as the door shut behind him, the sound small but final. The sheriff followed his boots heavy on the floor. The remaining customers looked around uncertainly before turning back to their meals. The storm outside had ended hours ago, but inside the aftermath felt like something new. A silence that wasn't fear anymore, but relief. Ilara stood behind the counter, breathing hard, her hand gripping the edge of the metal surface. Malik looked at her. It's over, he said softly. She shook her head, tears forming again. The sound of the rain returned by evening, soft and steady this time, a reminder that even storms had to rest after they broke something apart. The news of Gordon Pike's arrest spread faster than smoke across Brenton Hollow. People came out of their houses pretending they just wanted air. But really, they wanted to see the patrol car parked outside Millie's diner, with the manager inside, handcuffed and pale. The sheriff stood on the steps, talking low to one of his deputies, while the last of the Iron Hands lingered near their bikes, their leather jackets glistening under the streetlights. Malik Graves stood apart from them, leaning against his Harley with his arms crossed, the rain running off his shoulders. He didn't smile or gloat. He just watched the diner door swing open and shut as people moved in and out, whispering words like "finally" and "about time." He wasn't the kind of man who believed in happy endings. Justice wasn't clean, it was slow, ugly, and usually came too late. But tonight, watching Gordon's face through the rain-specked glass of the cruiser, Malik felt something he hadn't felt in years. A small, quiet peace. Elara came out a moment later, her face streaked with tears, but no longer hiding behind fear. Her apron was gone. Her hands were empty. She stopped on the steps and looked at the flashing red lights painting the wet pavement. When her eyes found Malik, she hesitated, then started walking toward him, slow and uncertain. "You should go," she said when she reached him. Her voice was tired, almost apologetic. "You've done enough." Malik shook his head. "No, not yet. He's gone," she whispered. "It's over." Malik looked past her at the sheriff's car, pulling away its lights fading down the road. "For him, maybe," he said quietly. "Not for you." She frowned, not understanding. "What do you mean you've been living under his shadow for years? When that shadow's gone, the light hurts at first." Elara swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "I don't even know who I am without that fear." Malik's eyes softened. "Then it's time to find out." She stared at him, trembling slightly. "Why are you doing this?" Malik hesitated. "Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it. And I didn't help the one person who needed me most." She looked down at her shoes, the water pooling around them. "Your sister?" she asked softly. His breath caught. "How do you know about her?" Elara's voice was faint, carried more by the rain than the air. "Naima Graves. She worked with me years ago before she trailed off, unable to finish. We waited tables together in Fayette. She used to talk about her brother, the one who rode motorcycles, and said he'd come back for her someday." Malik's heart stopped. The world seemed to tilt, the rain falling harder, louder. "You knew her?" he said, his voice breaking for the first time in years. Elara nodded slowly, tears mixing with the rain. She was kind to everyone. Always gave away her tips to the girls who needed it more. She said you were the strongest man she knew. Malik turned away, his hands gripping the handlebars of his bike, to hide the way they shook. The air around him felt too small, too full of ghosts. "I wasn't strong enough," he said finally. "Not for her." Elara took a step closer. "She didn't blame you." He looked at her sharply. "You don't know that." "She told me," Elara said, her voice trembling. "She said my brother's carrying too much already. If anything happens to me, tell him to let it go." The rain hit harder, running in streaks down Malik's face, though it could have been tears now. Even he didn't know anymore. He turned back to her, the look in his eyes, unreadable, but human, raw. "Why didn't you tell me before?" She shook her head. "I didn't remember until you said her name the first day you came in. I thought I was dreaming. You look just like her when you're angry." Malik let out a bitter laugh that sounded more like pain. "She always said I'd die angry." "Maybe that's not how it ends," Elara said softly. They stood there in silence, the rain falling between them like a curtain drawn by memory. The town behind them hummed with whispers, headlights passing doors, closing people, pretending they weren't watching. Malik finally spoke again. "You should go home. Pack your things. Leave this place behind before it buries you too." She looked up at him, eyes shining under the flickering streetlight. "And go where he shrugged. Anywhere but here. Start over. You don't need permission." "What about you?" she asked. "Where will you go?" He stared at the wet road stretching out of town, endless and empty. "Wherever the road takes me. That's the only thing I ever trusted." She reached out suddenly, grabbing his arm. The touch startled him, her fingers small but strong. "Don't run from this," she said. "Not everything that hurts has to be left behind." He looked down at her hand. then at her face so familiar now that he could almost see his sister in her eyes. "You sound like her," he murmured. "She used to say the same thing." Alara smiled faintly, tears breaking loose. Maybe she finally got through. For a long moment, they stayed like that, two broken souls stitched together by the memory of someone gone. Then Malik gently pulled his arm free, his voice low but steady. "Take care of yourself, Alara. Naima would have wanted that." She nodded, wiping her face, trying to hold herself together. "And you?" she asked. He smiled for the first time, faint but real. "I'll figure it out." The sheriff's car disappeared down the road, its lights a dying ember in the dark. The Iron Hands started their engines one by one, their leader still motionless beside his bike. The sound rose like a heartbeat in the night. Alara stepped back toward the diner, her silhouette framed by the glow of the neon sign. She turned once more. The next morning dawned quiet over Brenton Hollow, but it wasn't the same quiet the town had always known. It was softer now, lighter, as if something had finally been lifted. The storm had scrubbed the air clean, leaving the streets glistening beneath the pale sunlight. Malik Graves rode through town alone, the sound of his Harley no longer drawing curtains shut, but making people step to their porches to watch. For years they had crossed the street when they heard the Iron Hands coming, whispering words like trouble and outlaw. But now whispers had turned to nods, fear had turned to curiosity, and for the first time respect began to replace the old wariness. As Malik passed Millie's diner, he slowed. The windows were dark, the door still locked, but something new caught his eye. A small bouquet of daisies sitting neatly on the steps, tied with a ribbon. He parked his bike and walked up, kneeling beside it. The note tucked between the flowers was written in careful, uneven handwriting. It said only, "Thank you for helping her." Malik stood there for a moment, the weight of that simple message sinking in. Around him, the town carried on in quiet motion. A man sweeping his storefront looked up and nodded. Two teenagers on bikes slowed to wave. Malik didn't wave back, but his chin lifted slightly in acknowledgement. It wasn't pride, he felt it was something quieter, something he didn't know how to name. Gratitude maybe, but laced with sorrow. Inside, the diner looked emptier than he remembered, as if Gordon Pike's presence had stained the air and taking him away had left a hollow space that hadn't yet filled. The sheriff had boarded up the kitchen door and posted a sign, "Under investigation." Malik looked through the window one last time, remembering Alara's trembling hands pouring coffee, the sound of her voice when she said Naima's name, the way she stood taller after everything broke. He hoped she'd already left town. She deserved a new start somewhere that didn't smell like old grease and fear. He turned back toward his bike, the air warm on his face. For a long time he just stood there, listening to the faint hum of life returning to Brenton Hollow. Somewhere down the street, a radio played an old blues song about forgiveness. He didn't believe in forgiveness for himself, but he did believe in change, and maybe that was close enough. The rest of the Iron Hands arrived later that afternoon, their engines growling low as they rolled into town. Hawk pulled up beside him, shutting off his bike. "You see this?" he asked, pointing at the diner steps. There were more flowers now, lilies, wildflowers, even a single red rose. Malik nodded. "Yeah." Hawk scratched his beard. "Never thought I'd see the day people left us flowers instead of calling the cops." "People remember who stands up?" Malik said. Hawk grinned faintly. "Guess that makes you the town's hero." Malik shook his head. "I don't believe in heroes. Just people doing what others won't." Hawk's grin faded into something more thoughtful. "Still, word's spreading. Got a letter at the clubhouse this morning. Woman from 2 towns over. Said she used to work for a man like Pike. Said what we did gave her courage to leave." Malik frowned. "She wrote us, addressed it to the Iron Hands," Hawk said. "Said she didn't have anyone else to thank." Malik didn't respond right away. The sound of the wind filled the space between them. He looked toward the hills, the long stretch of road leading out of town. "You keep it?" he asked finally. "Yeah? Figured you'd want to read it." Hawk pulled a folded envelope from his jacket and handed it over. The paper was damp from the humidity, the ink a little smudged, but the words were still clear. You don't know me, but you reminded me that fear doesn't have to last forever. Thank you for reminding the world what real strength looks like." Malik folded it again and slipped it into his pocket without a word. Hawk clapped him on the shoulder. "We're heading north after this, boss." "You coming?" Malik looked back at the diner one last time. "Soon," he said quietly. The others nodded, starting their engines. As they rode off, their tires sent sprays of water across the street, sunlight catching on the mist like shards of glass. Malik stayed behind, the sound of their engines fading into the distance. A few minutes later, an old man with a cane shuffled out of the barbershop across the street. "You that biker he called?" Malik turned. "Depends who's asking." The old man chuckled. "The one who stood up to Gordon Pike?" "Yeah," Malik said simply. "That was me." The man nodded approvingly. "Good. About damn time someone did." He started to turn away, but paused. "World could use more men like you, son." Malik watched him go, unsure what to do with the words. He wasn't used to kindness that didn't come with suspicion. When he finally got back on his Harley, the wind had shifted. It carried the smell of rain still lingering on the asphalt, and something faint, but new, the smell of change. As he started the engine, he glanced one more time at the flowers, now swaying gently in the breeze. Maybe the town wasn't ready to forgive its ghosts, but it had finally learned to face them. And maybe he had too. He rode through Brenton Hollow one last time, past the diner, past the gas station, past the crooked sign that had once made him laugh. People waved. He didn't wave back, but his eyes softened with something close to peace. The road opened up ahead, stretching toward the horizon, where sunlight broke through the clouds. Behind him, the town grew smaller, but its echo stayed with him, the echo of a promise kept of justice finally spoken aloud. When the Iron Hands regrouped that evening at a truck stop miles out, Malik joined them quietly. The men were laughing again, but it was different this time. Lighter, freer. They weren't just riders anymore. They were something else, something the world hadn't expected them to be protectors. Hawk handed him another letter, this one still sealed. "Came in from Maple Creek," he said. Malik took it, eyebrows raised. "You open it." "Didn't have to," Hawk said. The return name was Ilara Wynn. Malik's breath caught, and for a moment he didn't move. The noise around him faded as he broke the seal carefully, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. The note inside was short, written in clean handwriting that looked steadier than her voice had ever sounded. "I left. I found work at a small cafe in Cedar Hollow. It's quiet here, and the people smile for real. Weeks drifted by, like wind through open plains, and by the time September came, the air had grown softer in Brenton Hollow. The town had changed in small, quiet ways enough for Malik Graves to notice whenever he rode through. The people who once avoided the sound of engines now greeted the Iron Hands with small nods and cautious smiles. Murals had started appearing on the sides of old brick buildings painted by local artists inspired by what had happened at the diner. One of them showed a woman standing in the rain beneath a neon sign, her apron falling away like broken chains. Beneath it, someone had written 3 words, "Kindness can roar." Malik stopped by once to look at it, saying nothing, only touching the edge of the wall, as if acknowledging something sacred. After that day, he didn't stay long in town. He and the Iron Hands took their rides further north, crossing state lines, helping with charity drives, delivering food to shelters. The name that once struck fear now carried stories whispered at gas stations and diners across counties about the black biker leader who stood up for a bruised waitress and changed a town's heart. Malik didn't care for stories, but he cared that they meant something. It wasn't about him, it was about her. One late afternoon, his ride took him through Cedar Hollow, a quiet place nestled between farmland and pine groves. The sun was sinking low, painting the sky gold. He wasn't looking for anything when he saw the small cafe at the corner of Main and Birch, its sign hand-painted with careful strokes Hazel's Place. The name meant nothing at first, but something about the soft, yellow curtains and the way the light fell across the windows made him slow down. When he parked and walked in, the smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon greeted him. The walls were warm, the floor creaked faintly, and a record player spun slow jazz in the corner. He took a seat at the counter, glancing at the chalkboard menu that offered nothing fancy, just honesty, in the form of hot drinks and pies baked that morning. Then he heard a voice he hadn't expected to ever hear again. "Be right with you." He turned slowly, and there she was. Elara Wynne. No uniform this time, no bruises, no trembling hands. She wore a simple white blouse and a red scarf, her hair loose, her smile real. When she looked up and saw him, she froze for a second, then her eyes softened. "You found it," she said quietly. Malik nodded once, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Didn't know I was looking." She poured him a cup of coffee, placing it in front of him like old times, though everything about this moment felt new. "I thought you'd be halfway across the country by now," she said. "I was," Malik replied. "Road led me here." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Still letting the road decide things for you. It's the only thing that never lied to me," he said, his voice half a whisper. She looked down at the counter, tracing a circle with her fingertip. "I read about you. The charity rides, the letters people sent to your club." "That wasn't me," he said. "That was them. I just pointed the way." Elara's eyes met his, warm but steady. "Maybe, but they wouldn't have started without you." The conversation paused as another customer entered, an older woman in a denim jacket who greeted Elara with a hug. Malik watched her interact, sincere, unhurried, completely alive. He'd seen people try to act happy before, but this wasn't an act. She had built something here, something soft but strong. When the woman left, Elara turned back to him. "You staying long?" she asked. Malik shrugged. "Long enough for another cup." She smiled and refilled it. When she turned, she saw the small envelope he'd slid under his cup. "What's this?" she asked, lifting it slightly. "A bad habit," he said with a smirk. "Paying double." She opened it halfway and saw bills folded neatly inside. "Malik, you can't keep doing this." "It's not for you," he said. "It's for the shelter fund you've been running out back." Her mouth fell open slightly. "How do you know about that roads talk?" he said simply. She shook her head, speechless for a moment, then smiled, her eyes glistening. "You haven't changed much." Malik took a slow sip of coffee. "You have," he said. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was comfortable, the kind that came from people who had already said all the important things once and didn't need to say them again. When it came time for him to leave, he stood leaving another envelope under his plate. Elara tried to stop him, but he raised a hand. "Don't argue," he said. "Just use it." She sighed, but her smile gave her away. "You're impossible." "So I've been told?" As he turned toward the door, she said softly, "Malik." He stopped. "You know it's my birthday today, right?" He looked back, eyebrows raised. "No, I didn't." "Funny," she said, "it's been a good one already." He nodded once and stepped outside. The bell above the door jingled as it closed, but Elara noticed something gleaming under his empty cup. She reached for it, her breath catching when her fingers closed around the small silver ring, engraved with the letter N, Naima's ring. Her hand trembled as she lifted it to the light, tears welling in her eyes. For a moment, the cafe blurred around her. Malik was already gone, the sound of his Harley fading into the distance, the road calling him back the way it always did. But she understood the gift. It wasn't a goodbye, it was a passing of peace. He had carried the weight of that ring for years, and now he had left it with someone who would keep its meaning alive without pain. Elara slipped it onto a chain and fastened it around her neck, pressing it against her heart. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, lighting the wet pavement with gold. The same breeze that once carried fear through Millie's diner now swept gently through Hazel's place, fluttering the curtains and stirring the scent of cinnamon and hope. Malik rode on the wind against his face, the road stretching wide and forgiving ahead of him. He didn't look back. He didn't have to. The sun began to dip behind the hills when Malik Graves and the Iron Hands reached the overlook just outside Cedar Hollow, where the sky stretched open and the road seemed to run forever. The golden hour light made their jackets glow, the words "iron hands" burning softly in the fading sun. Malik parked his Harley at the edge, cutting the engine, letting the silence settle after miles of roaring engines. The wind was calm, carrying the scent of pine and rain-soaked asphalt. Below them, the world looked peaceful farmlands rolling into forests, rivers twisting like veins of silver through the earth. Hawk walked up beside him, lighting a cigarette, the smoke curling around his beard. "You think you'll ever stop riding?" he asked. Malik smirked faintly. "You ever stop breathing?" Hawk laughed quietly, then looked toward the horizon. "It's strange," he said. "All these years we thought we were the storm. Turns out we were just clearing the air." Malik nodded. "Maybe storms ain't meant to destroy everything. Maybe they just make space for something to grow." Hawk tossed the cigarette away and clapped him on the shoulder. "You getting poetic in your old age?" "Maybe," Malik said. "Or maybe I just ran out of reasons to stay angry." They stood there for a while, the others talking quietly near their bikes, the engines ticking as they cooled. The world felt still, the kind of still that comes only after chaos finds its rest. Malik looked down at the road leading back toward Cedar Hollow, where Hazel's place sat tucked between the trees. He could almost see the faint glow of its sign from up here. He pictured Ilara inside, closing up for the night, the ring he'd left around her neck catching the last light of day. He didn't regret giving it away. For years, Naima's ring had been a weight, a reminder of failure. But now, knowing it rested with Ilara, someone who had survived, someone who had found her way, it no longer felt like guilt. It felt like completion. "What now?" Hawk asked. Malik stared at the horizon. "We keep moving," he said. "There's always another road." Hawk grinned. "You think she'll be okay?" "Yeah," Malik said softly. "She's stronger than she knows." The sun slipped lower, spilling orange fire across the clouds. The iron hands mounted their bikes again, engines rumbling in harmony. Malik swung his leg over his Harley and fastened his helmet, the familiar weight grounding him. He felt the chain around his neck where the ring used to be, the spot now empty, but somehow lighter. Hawk revved his engine and looked over. Where to Boss Malik started his bike, the growl filling the air. "Wherever the road needs us next." They rolled out together, the sound of their engines echoing across the valley like thunder, remembering its purpose. As they rode down the highway, the fading light caught something new on the back of Malik's jacket. Freshly stitched to the Iron Hands emblem, now carried one more name beneath it: Naima. The patch had been sewn there quietly by one of the younger members after hearing the story of his sister. Malik hadn't asked for it, but he wore it with quiet pride. Every mile they rode was now for her, for Ilara, for every person who had lived too long in silence. As the sky turned violet, they passed through towns that hadn't yet heard of them, places where fear still hid behind diner windows, and where men like Gordon Pike still thought their power was untouchable. The Iron Hands didn't roar through those places for intimidation anymore. They came like a promise, a reminder that someone was watching, that kindness could wear leather and carry scars and still stand unbroken. Miles later, when the stars began to show, they stopped at a rest station. Malik leaned against his bike, looking up at the night sky. The stars shimmered faintly, and for a moment he thought of his sister again, her laughter, her stubbornness, her belief that even people like him could still be good. He whispered under his breath, "You were right, Naima. The road did lead somewhere." Hawk approached, handing him a cup of coffee from a vending machine. "You talking to the sky again?" Malik smiled. "Maybe it's talking back." They sat in companionable silence, watching the headlights of passing cars streak across the distant highway. For the first time in years, Malik didn't feel haunted. He felt human, the kind of peace that doesn't announce itself, but seeps in slowly like dawn after a long night. The Iron Hands had started as a pack of men running from the world. But somewhere along the line, they'd become something else, a force that helped it heal. "You ever think people can really change?" Hawk asked. Malik took a sip of the coffee, grimacing at the bitterness, but finishing it anyway. "People don't change," he said. They remember who they were before the pain made them forget. Hawk nodded slowly. Guess that's what you did. Maybe Malik said. Or maybe I just stopped running from her voice. The night deepened cool and wide. A soft breeze brushed against the patches on their jackets, whispering through the tall grass by the roadside. Malik felt the wind tug at him like an invitation, the kind that only the road could give. He climbed back onto his bike, signaling to the others. Let's go, he said. We've got more miles to put between who we were and who we're supposed to be. As they rode off, the stars seemed to follow, glittering above the winding road. Back in Cedar Hollow, Ilara closed the cafe and stepped outside. The moon hung low, silver and calm. She locked the door and walked to the edge of the street, her hands resting on the chain around her neck. The ring gleamed faintly against her skin. She looked toward the highway in the distance, where the faint echo of engines rolled like thunder softened by mercy. She smiled through tears, whispering to the wind, "You came for her after all." The breeze carried her words away, up into the night, where the stars stretched, endless and forgiving. The end. If this story moved, you don't forget to subscribe, and share it, so more people can feel its message. Tell me in the comments what moment hit you the hardest, and where in the world are you watching from your thoughts. Help keep stories like this alive.